The mouse of the day is Winking Wesley, and he's quite the trickster, guys. Before we get into today's video, don't forget to squeak like and subscribe. Winking Wesley was known in every cheese shop and deli across town, with his slick fur, a glint in his eye, and a very charismatic smile. Wesley was a legend, but he wasn't just a buyer of cheese. No, that wasn't his style. He had one goal in life, and that was to sample the finest cheeses without ever reaching for his wallet to pay for them. On any given afternoon, you could spot him slipping through the automatic doors of Mousery Delights, his favorite cheese shop. Wesley would stroll down the aisles, nodding at the displays of cheddar wheels, mozzarella balls, and Swiss wedges as if he were some connoisseur. To anyone watching, he seemed like a genuine cheese enthusiast ready to make a big purchase. But the employees knew better after a while. Today's offering was a particularly creamy wheel of brie arranged in delicate cubes on a little silver tray. Perfectly aware of the employee's eyes on him, Wesley reached out, picked up a cube, and popped it in his mouth. He savored it, smacking his lips in an exaggerated delight, and he gave the employee a wink. "Quite a taste," he said with a grin. "I'd say it's almost worth purchasing." The employee, a young mouse named Tim who had fallen victim to Wesley's antics more times than he could count, tried to keep a straight face. "Would you like a wedge wrapped up to take home?" Wesley's whiskers twitched as he leaned in close, lowering his voice. "Oh, I don't know, my friend. I like to sample widely." With another cheesy wink, he moved down the aisle, leaving Tim to shake his head, muttering under his breath. It was always the same routine with Wesley, an endless loop of tastings, winks, and quick exits. As Wesley made his way through the shop, he stopped at each sample station. At the cheddar station, he nodded approvingly after nibbling a crumbly cube. Aged perfectly, but alas, cheddar is so last week. At the Swiss station, he lifted a sample to the light, squinting through the holes. "Ah, the craftsmanship here is quite exquisite, but not worthy of my funds." The employees all watched him, torn between annoyance and amusement. They all knew his game at this point, but his charisma and shamelessness left them with no real reason to step in. He was kind after all, a local celebrity, Winking Wesley, the mouse with the best taste in town and no intention of ever paying for anything. One of the employees, a seasoned mouse named Edith, had finally had enough. She'd been working at Mousery Delights for years and had seen every trick in the book from Wesley. Wesley's routine was nothing new to her, and she was determined to put him in his place today. As Wesley sauntered over to the next sample tray, Edith stepped in front of him, blocking his path with a broad no-nonsense grin. "Well, Wesley," she said, folding her arms. "Sampling again, I see." Wesley raised an eyebrow, giving her his trademark wink. "Can't resist the finest offerings in town, Edith." She smirked, unmoved. "I know, and I also know that I've never seen you buy as much as a crumb here." Wesley chuckled, pretending to be surprised. "What can I say? A refined palate takes work. Research, you know?" Edith nodded, a twinkle in her eye. Of course. Well, I've got a new cheese in the back that we haven't put out yet. It's an exclusive blend. Very few mice get to try it." Wesley's ears perked up, and he leaned forward, intrigued. "An exclusive blend, you say?" Edith nodded, her voice low and cynical. "Aged 12 months with a complex flavor profile. Sharp at first, but it has a creamy finish that lingers. Only true cheese enthusiasts would appreciate it." Wesley's mouth watered at the description. "Well then, lead the way, Edith." He followed her to a corner of the shop where she produced a small wrapped wedge of cheese from under the counter. She unwrapped it carefully, letting the aroma waft into the air. Wesley's nose twitched in excitement. It smelled incredible, rich and tangy, with just a hint of sweetness. "Before you taste it, I'd like to see some payment, Wesley." Wesley blinked momentarily, thrown off his game. He glanced at the cheese, then back at Edith, his mind racing. With a sly grin, he gave her another wink. "Ah, Edith, you drive a hard bargain, but I'm afraid my wallet has wandered off." Edith smirked, holding the cheese just out of reach. "Well, in that case, I'll have to keep the exclusive blend in the back. It's for paying customers only, sorry." She rewrapped the cheese with a flourish, turning back to place it on the shelf again. Wesley watched her go, feeling a rare pang of defeat. But just as he was about to leave, he spotted a wheel of Gouda nearby, unattended and begging to be sampled. He popped it in his mouth, savoring it as if he didn't have a care in the world. Wesley finished the last bite of Gouda, relishing the creamy texture and the way it melted on his tongue. He glanced around, noticing that Edith was still watching him from across the room, her eyes narrowing as she saw him snacking on another sample. He gave her a bold wink, flashing a grin that said, "Catch me if you can, Edith." But Edith was not done. She motioned to another employee, a mouse named Jasper, and whispered something to him quietly. Jasper, looking a bit hesitant, nodded and scurried back off to the back of the store. Wesley raised an eyebrow, curious but unfazed. He was Winking Wesley after all, the mouse with a taste for cheese and no intention of paying for it. A little opposition only added a little fun. Now Wesley moved towards the next sample tray, a sharp Parmesan that looked particularly inviting. Jasper returned finally, wheeling out a tall, gleaming display case. Inside was a cheese he had never seen before, carefully wrapped in a red and gold cloth. A small sign on top read, "The legendary Bleu de Mystique." Wesley was in shock. His eyes widened. The Bleu de Mystique was the stuff of legend. It was rumored to be made by mice in a distant village who used a secret blend of herbs and aging techniques. Only the wealthiest of mice ever got a taste, and even then, it was a rare find. Wesley's heart raced as he imagined tasting it, the flavors dancing on his tongue like nothing he'd ever experienced before. Edith noticed his reaction and smirked, clearly pleased. "Ah, I see you're interested in our most prized cheese," she said, her voice dipping. "But this one is for serious customers only." "Well, Edith, I know I've got a refined taste. I think I'm exactly the kind of mouse who should sample this fine cheese." Edith tapped her chin, pretending to consider. Yes, you are known for your fine taste, Wesley, but if you want a sample of the Blue Day Mystique, there will be one small requirement. Wesley's ears twitched with curiosity. Oh, and what's that, Edith? Edith held up a small decorative coin jar from the counter and shook it around, the label reading Tips for Taste. She gave him a pointed look. A single coin, Wesley. Surely a cheese connoisseur such as yourself can part with just one coin for this opportunity. Wesley's grin faltered. A coin, He glanced at the jar and then at the magnificent Blue Day Mystique, his mind racing. He hadn't brought his wallet as usual, and besides, he was notorious for never paying. It was a point of pride, a matter of principle. He could not pay, but this cheese was legendary cheese. As he hesitated, Edith added, "Of course, if it's too much trouble, you're welcome to move along for the free samples." Wesley was flustered. She was challenging him, daring him to break his rule just once. The other employees watched him with anticipation, knowing they were about to witness a rare moment. Wesley cleared his throat, pretending to look uninterested. Well, Edith, I don't normally, but for a cheese of this caliber? With a dramatic flourish, he reached into his coat pocket and produced a single coin, holding it up so that everyone could see. The employees gasped, and Edith smirked, raising an eyebrow and dropping it into the jar. Thank you for your generosity, Wesley, Edith said, her tone dipping with satisfaction. She opened the display, carefully unwrapping the Blue Day Mystique. The scent hit him immediately, a sharp, complex aroma that made his whiskers twitch in anticipation. She sliced a tiny piece, placing it delicately on a small silver tray. Wesley picked it up, bringing it up to his nose and inhaling the fragrance before popping it in his mouth. The flavor was unlike anything he'd ever tasted before. Rich, layered with hints of herbs and creamy cheese, almost mystical. It had an almost mystical quality that seemed to linger on his tongue. For once he was speechless, lost in the experience of perfect cheese. The employees all watched, their mouths hanging open as Wesley savored the bite, his eyes closed in bliss. Finally, he opened his eyes, a look of pure satisfaction on his face. "Worth every coin," he said. Edith nodded, clearly pleased. "I'm glad you think so. And remember, Wesley, the best things in life are worth paying for. At least every now and again." Wesley chuckled, giving her a final wink. "Okay, well played, Edith, well played." As he turned to leave, he noticed the employees whispering among themselves, some still shocked that Winking Wesley had actually paid for something. It was the talk of the town for weeks, the day that the legendary freeloader had finally been convinced to part with a coin. But as Wesley strolled down the street, he couldn't help but smile. He'd tasted the Blue Day Mystique, conquered the ultimate challenge, and somehow still left with his reputation intact. And who knew, perhaps, just perhaps, he'd be back one day with a coin in his paw to pay for some more. So do you guys mess with Winking Wesley?